Man sees hidden prophecies after death. What he reveals will shock you, NDE. Do you want to know? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. It was a day like any other for Marcus Kane. He was a man of routine, waking up at dawn, sipping his coffee while reading the news, and heading to his corporate job in the heart of the city. A marketing executive by profession, Marcus thrived on the structured chaos of his world. Deadlines, meetings, and strategies filled his days, leaving little room for reflection or introspection. But that day would mark the beginning of a journey that would shatter everything he thought he knew. As he exited his office building, briefcase in hand, the bustling streets of downtown were alive with their usual energy, honking cars, rushing pedestrians, and the hum of city life. Marcus stepped off the curb, glancing at his phone to check an email. In a split second, he heard the screech of tires. He turned his head just in time to see the headlights of a speeding car bearing down on him. There was no time to react. The impact was sudden and violent. The world around him blurred as he was thrown to the ground, his body crumpling like paper. Gasps and screams echoed in the background, but they felt distant, as though coming from another realm. Darkness crept in, swallowing the sounds and the pain. When Marcus opened his eyes, he was no longer on the pavement. The scene before him was surreal, a vast expanse of light stretching endlessly, warm and soothing yet overwhelming in its magnitude. He felt weightless, as though the burdens of his earthly life had been stripped away. There was no sense of time, no ticking clock to measure the seconds. Instead, there was an all-encompassing stillness. As he stood, or floated, he couldn't quite tell. A presence emerged from the light. It wasn't a figure in the traditional sense, it was more like an essence, radiating peace and an unfathomable wisdom. Marcus felt no fear, only an immense curiosity. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice echoing in the emptiness. The presence didn't speak in words, yet he understood it perfectly. Its response resonated directly in his mind. "You are in a place beyond the physical, Marcus. You have crossed the threshold between life and what lies beyond." Panic flickered briefly in Marcus's chest. "Am I dead?" "Not in the way you think," the presence replied. "You are here to see, to understand, and to choose." "To see what?" Marcus asked, his voice trembling. "What am I supposed to understand?" The light around him shifted, and suddenly, scenes began to unfold before his eyes. They weren't memories, yet they felt deeply familiar. He saw people, strangers and loved ones alike, engaged in moments of kindness and cruelty, triumph and despair. Each scene was vivid, pulsating with emotion. The first vision was of a young boy sitting on a park bench, clutching a loaf of bread. His clothes were tattered, and his eyes were wide with hunger. Marcus felt the boy's desperation as though it were his own. Then a stranger approached, a man in a worn coat who offered the boy a sandwich. The boy's eyes lit up, and the gratitude that radiated from him was palpable. "Why are you showing me this?" Marcus asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Because every action, no matter how small, carries weight," the presence replied. "The ripple effects of kindness can change the course of lives." The scene shifted to a bustling office, a boardroom filled with executives arguing over quarterly projections. Marcus recognized himself among them, his younger self, sharp and ambitious. He saw a moment he had long forgotten, a young intern hesitantly approaching him with an idea. In the vision, Marcus brushed her off, too consumed by his own agenda to listen. The pain of regret surged through him. "I didn't realize," he murmured. "I didn't think it mattered." "It all matters," the presence said. "Every choice, every word, every action leaves an imprint." The next vision was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. It was a city, no, a world, bathed in an eerie glow. The sky was fractured, streaked with unnatural colors, and the ground was littered with ruins. People wandered aimlessly, their faces etched with fear and despair. Marcus felt their anguish as though it were his own. "This is the future?" he asked, his voice trembling. "It is a possible future," the presence replied. "One born of division, greed, and the failure to act with compassion. But how can I change this?" Marcus demanded. I'm just one person. What can I do? The presence emanated a sense of calm. Change begins with one choice, one action. The smallest spark can ignite a flame. The light around Marcus began to dim, and he felt a pull, gentle yet insistent, drawing him back. Wait, he cried. I don't understand. What am I supposed to do with this? You will know when the time comes, the presence replied. But remember, Marcus, the path forward is shaped by the choices you make today. With a jolt, Marcus opened his eyes to find himself in a hospital bed, the sterile smell of antiseptic filling his nostrils. Machines beeped softly around him, and a nurse stood nearby, checking his vitals. You're awake, she exclaimed, her voice a mix of relief and surprise. We weren't sure if you'd pull through. Marcus tried to speak, but his throat felt dry and raw. The nurse handed him a cup of water, and he sipped slowly, his mind racing with fragments of the visions he had seen. How long have I been here? He croaked. 2 days, the nurse replied. You were in a terrible accident. It's a miracle you survived. A miracle. The word echoed in his mind, carrying a weight he couldn't ignore. Marcus knew that what he had experienced wasn't a mere hallucination. It was something far greater, something he was meant to carry forward. Marcus lay in the hospital bed, the weight of what he had experienced pressing heavily on him. The sterile walls of the room felt constricting, a stark contrast to the vastness of the place he had just been. Every detail of the visions replayed in his mind. The boy in the park, the intern he had brushed off, and the haunting future that seemed too real to be ignored. A knock at the door startled him. It was his sister, Camille, her face a mixture of relief and worry as she stepped into the room. Marcus, she said softly, rushing to his side. I've been so worried about you. I'm okay, he said, his voice still raspy. But even as he spoke, he knew that wasn't entirely true. He wasn't sure if he was okay. How could he be after what he had seen? Camille pulled a chair up to his bedside and sat down. The doctors said it's a miracle you survived that accident. They didn't think you'd wake up. Marcus managed a weak smile. Miracle seems to be the word of the day. Camille frowned, sensing the shift in his tone. What's going on, Marcus? You look different. Like something's weighing on you. He hesitated, unsure of how to explain what had happened. It's hard to put into words, he finally said. I saw things. When I was unconscious, or maybe dead, I don't even know what to call it. But it wasn't just dreams, Camille. It was real. Camille tilted her head, her concern deepening. What kind of things? Do you mean memories? Or something else? Something else, Marcus said, his voice trembling. He described the light, the presence, and the visions that had unfolded before him. He spoke of the boy in the park, the boardroom scene, and the desolate world he had seen. Camille listened intently, her eyes widening as he recounted the details. Marcus, she said when he finished, her voice barely above a whisper. That sounds incredible, but also terrifying. Do you think it means something? I don't think, he replied firmly. I know. It was a warning, Camille. A wake-up call. I've spent so much of my life focused on myself, on climbing the corporate ladder, hitting goals, impressing people who don't even matter. But now I see how shallow it all is. How much I've ignored the things that really matter. Camille reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. So what are you going to do? I don't know yet, Marcus admitted. But I can't just go back to the way things were. I have to do something. I have to make a difference. Over the next few days, as Marcus recovered, he began to piece together a plan. The visions had shown him two paths, one filled with compassion and connection, and another mired in division and despair. He knew he couldn't change the world overnight, but he believed that even small actions could ripple outward, creating waves of change. His first step was reaching out to the people he had neglected or overlooked in his life. He started with the young intern he had brushed off years ago. Her name was Kara, and after some digging, he found her contact information. She was now a junior executive at another company, climbing the ranks despite the obstacles she had faced. Kara, he said when she picked up the phone. This is Marcus Kane. I don't know if you remember me, but... I remember, she interrupted, her tone cautious. What do you want, Marcus? He took a deep breath. I want to apologize for the way I treated you back then. I was arrogant and dismissive, and I didn't give you the respect you deserved. I realize now how wrong I was, and I wanted to say I'm sorry. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Kara spoke, her voice softer. I appreciate that, Marcus. It means a lot. But why now? What's changed? Marcus hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. Let's just say I had a wake-up call. And I'm trying to make things right. The call with Kara was just the beginning. Marcus reached out to old colleagues, friends, and even family members he had drifted away from over the years. Each conversation was an opportunity to reconnect, to acknowledge his past mistakes, and to show the people in his life that he valued them. But it wasn't enough. The visions had shown him more than just personal failings. They had revealed a world in need of healing. Marcus knew he needed to think bigger, to find ways to make a broader impact. One night, as he lay in bed, the memory of the boy in the park came back to him. The image of those wide, hungry eyes stayed with him, a constant reminder of the power of small acts of kindness. He began researching local organizations that worked with underprivileged children and families, looking for ways to get involved. He found a nonprofit that ran programs for homeless youth, providing meals, education, and support. Without hesitation, Marcus reached out to them, offering his time, resources, and expertise. He began volunteering at their community center, helping with everything from serving meals to mentoring teenagers. At first, the work was challenging. Marcus wasn't used to the emotional weight of hearing the kids' stories, their struggles, their fears, their hopes. But as he spent more time with them, he began to see the world through their eyes. He learned their names, their dreams, and the obstacles they faced. And he realized how much potential they had, if only someone believed in them. One boy in particular stood out to him. His name was Jordan, a shy 14-year-old with a talent for drawing. Marcus often found him sketching in the corner of the center, his notebooks filled with intricate designs and characters. "Those are incredible," Marcus said one afternoon, sitting down next to him. "Have you ever thought about pursuing art as a career?" Jordan shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "What's the point? It's not like anyone would take me seriously." "That's not true," Marcus said firmly. "You've got a gift, Jordan. And the world needs to see it." Jordan looked up at him, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "You really think so?" "I know so," Marcus replied. "And I'm going to help you make it happen." Marcus began mentoring Jordan, helping him apply for scholarships and connecting him with local artists who could guide him. Over time, Jordan's confidence grew, and his talent began to shine even brighter. Watching the boy flourish filled Marcus with a sense of purpose he had never felt before. But the work didn't stop there. Marcus continued to look for ways to expand his impact, using his skills as a marketer to raise awareness and funding for the nonprofit. He organized events, built partnerships with local businesses, and even launched a campaign to recruit more volunteers. His efforts didn't go unnoticed. The nonprofit saw a surge in donations and community support, allowing them to expand their programs and reach even more kids in need. The staff and volunteers often marveled at Marcus's energy and dedication, wondering what had driven such a dramatic transformation. One evening, after a particularly successful fundraiser, the director of the nonprofit pulled Marcus aside. "You've done so much for us," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "But I have to ask, what inspired you to get involved?" Marcus hesitated, the memory of his near-death experience flashing through his mind. He had kept the details of that day to himself, unsure of how others would react. But now, looking into the director's kind eyes, he felt a surge of courage. "I saw something," he said slowly. "When I was in that accident, I had an experience. I saw things that changed the way I see the world. And I realized I couldn't keep living the way I was. I needed to do more. To be more." The director nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Whatever you saw, it's led you to do incredible things. And I have no doubt that you're making a difference, not just for these kids, but for everyone who's been inspired by your story." Marcus left the conversation with the nonprofit director feeling lighter. For the first time in years, he felt he was on the right path, aligning his actions with a purpose that extended beyond himself. Still, the weight of the visions lingered. He often thought back to the desolate world he had seen in his near-death experience. The fractured skies, the fear etched into people's faces, it wasn't a scene he could shake. It felt like a warning, one he couldn't ignore. He began journaling every detail he could remember about that vision. He wrote down the way the air had felt, thick and heavy with despair. He described the sense of isolation he'd felt, as though humanity had torn itself apart. The more he wrote, the clearer it became. The vision wasn't just about some far-off dystopian future. It was a reflection of choices being made every day. One evening, as he flipped through his journal, an idea struck him. What if he could use his experiences to inspire others to make better choices? He had already seen how small actions, like mentoring Jordan or apologizing to Kara, could create ripples of change. What if those ripples could become waves? The idea both excited and terrified him. He wasn't a public speaker or a writer, and the thought of sharing his story on a larger scale made his stomach churn. But he knew it was the right thing to do. If his experience could prevent even one person from contributing to the division and greed he had seen, it would be worth it. The next day, Marcus reached out to a local community center that hosted events and workshops. He pitched the idea of sharing his near-death experience and the lessons he had learned. To his surprise, they were enthusiastic, offering him a spot at an upcoming event. The weeks leading up to the event were nerve-wracking. Marcus spent hours crafting his speech, rewriting and second-guessing every sentence. He practiced in front of a mirror, his reflection a mix of determination and anxiety. Camille, ever supportive, offered to listen and give feedback. "Remember," she said after one of his practice sessions, "this isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. People will connect with your honesty." On the day of the event, Marcus stood backstage, his palms sweating as he listened to the crowd murmuring on the other side of the curtain. The room wasn't huge, about 50 people, but to Marcus, it might as well have been a stadium. When his name was announced, he took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, and for a moment, he felt frozen. But then he saw Camille in the front row, giving him an encouraging nod. He gripped the microphone and began to speak. "At first, I thought it was just an accident," he began, his voice shaky but steadying with each word. "I thought I was just unlucky, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But what happened to me wasn't just an accident, it was a wake-up call." He described the accident in vivid detail, the way time had seemed to slow down as the car hurtled toward him. He spoke about waking up in the light, encountering the presence, and seeing the visions that had changed his life. "When I saw that boy in the park, hungry and alone, I felt his pain as though it were my own," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "And when I saw myself in that boardroom, brushing off someone who only wanted to be heard, I felt the regret like a physical weight. But the worst part, the part that still haunts me, was the future I saw." The room was silent, the audience hanging on his every word as he described the desolate world from his vision. He spoke about the division, the greed, and the absence of compassion that had led to such a bleak reality. "I realized that every choice we make, no matter how small, has the power to shape the world around us," Marcus said. "And I knew I couldn't keep living the way I had been. I had to change. I had to start making choices that mattered." When he finished, the room erupted into applause. People approached him afterward, some with tears in their eyes, thanking him for sharing his story. A young woman told him it had inspired her to reconcile with her estranged father. An older man said it reminded him of the importance of helping his neighbors. The experience was both humbling and invigorating. Marcus realized that sharing his story wasn't just about inspiring others, it was about holding himself accountable. He couldn't preach compassion and connection without practicing it every day. Word of Marcus's story began to spread. Invitations to speak at other events and organizations started pouring in. At first, Marcus hesitated, unsure if he was ready to take on such a public role. But with Camille's encouragement, he decided to step out of his comfort zone. He began speaking at schools, churches, and community groups, tailoring his message to each audience. He emphasized the power of small actions, urging people to look for opportunities to be kind, to listen, and to connect. His speeches weren't about grand gestures or impossible ideals. They were about the choices everyone could make in their daily lives. At one event, he met a high school student named Olivia, who approached him after his talk. "Your story really hit home for me," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been struggling to figure out what I want to do with my life, and hearing you talk about purpose, it just made something click." "What are you passionate about?" Marcus asked. Olivia hesitated. "Art. I love painting and drawing, but everyone keeps telling me it's not practical." Marcus smiled. "You know, I met a kid not too long ago who felt the same way. His name's Jordan, and he's an incredible artist. He almost gave up on his dream, but now he's thriving because he didn't listen to the naysayers." If art is your passion, Olivia, don't let anyone tell you it's not worth pursuing. Marcus's journey continued to evolve. He began writing a book about his experiences, combining his personal story with practical advice for living a more purposeful life. The process was challenging, forcing him to confront parts of himself he hadn't fully reckoned with. But it was also cathartic, a way to make sense of everything he had been through. The book, titled Ripples of Change, A Journey from Life to Beyond and Back, became a bestseller, resonating with readers across the globe. Marcus received letters from people who had been moved by his story, sharing how it had inspired them to reconnect with loved ones, volunteer in their communities, or simply be kinder in their daily interactions. Despite the growing attention, Marcus remained grounded. He continued volunteering at the nonprofit, mentoring kids like Jordan, and seeking out opportunities to make a difference. For him, the real reward wasn't the accolades or the recognition. It was seeing the tangible impact of his efforts. One day, as he walked through the park, he noticed a young boy sitting on a bench, clutching a sandwich. The sight brought back the vision he had seen, and for a moment, Marcus felt a pang of sadness. But then he noticed something else. A woman sitting beside the boy, talking to him and offering him a warm smile. The scene was so different from the one in his vision, and Marcus felt a surge of hope. He approached the pair, introducing himself and striking up a conversation. The woman explained that she worked for a local organization that provided meals and support for families in need. "That's amazing," Marcus said, genuinely moved. "How can I help?" The woman handed him a flyer, and Marcus immediately recognized the logo. It was an organization he had helped fund through one of his campaigns. The realization filled him with a sense of fulfillment. The ripples he had started were reaching further than he could have imagined. Marcus walked away from the park feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. He couldn't stop thinking about how the ripples of his actions had found their way into places he hadn't even imagined. It was proof that one small step could lead to bigger waves of change. The flyer in his hand served as a reminder that even when his efforts seemed small, they had the potential to touch countless lives. But as uplifting as this realization was, Marcus couldn't shake the lingering vision of the fractured world he had seen during his near-death experience. It wasn't just a haunting memory, it was a call to action, a reminder that there was still much more to be done. He resolved to take his efforts further, reaching new communities and inspiring others to step into their own power. One afternoon, Marcus received an email from a major conference organizer. They had heard about his speeches and his book, and they wanted him to speak at their annual global summit. It was a massive event, with attendees from all over the world, including policymakers, nonprofit leaders, and influential thinkers. Marcus stared at the email for a long moment, unsure if he was ready for such a large platform. Speaking to 50 or even 100 people was one thing, but addressing thousands felt overwhelming. The weight of responsibility bore down on him. What if he wasn't eloquent enough? What if he failed to deliver a message that resonated? He called Camille, his trusted confidant, for advice. "They want me to speak at this huge conference," he said, his voice filled with uncertainty. "I don't know if I can do it." "Marcus," Camille said firmly, "if anyone can do it, it's you. You've already changed so many lives with your story. This is just another opportunity to reach more people. Don't let fear hold you back." Her words gave him the courage he needed. He replied to the email, accepting the invitation. Over the next few weeks, he poured himself into preparing for the event, crafting a speech that combined his personal story with a message of hope and empowerment. He wanted every person in the audience to walk away feeling like they had the power to create positive change in their own lives and communities. The day of the summit arrived, and Marcus found himself backstage, pacing nervously as he waited for his turn to speak. The event was being held in a massive convention center, with rows upon rows of chairs filled with attendees. Cameras were set up to stream the talks live to audiences around the world. When his name was announced, Marcus took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The applause was thunderous, but he barely heard it over the pounding of his heart. The lights were blinding, and for a moment, he felt the familiar wave of anxiety threatening to overtake him. But then he remembered Camille's words. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. He began to speak, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. 2 years ago, I was in an accident that changed my life. It was a moment that forced me to confront everything I thought I knew about myself and the world around me. He described the near-death experience, the visions, and the lessons he had learned. He spoke about the boy in the park, the shattered future he had seen, and the choices he had made to change the trajectory of his life. As he spoke, he felt the tension in the room shift. The audience was captivated, hanging on his every word. But this isn't just about my story, Marcus said, his voice rising with conviction. It's about all of us. Every single one of us has the power to create ripples of change. We don't have to wait for a grand opportunity or a dramatic moment. Change starts with the choices we make every day, the way we treat the people around us, the causes we support, and the values we uphold. He paused, scanning the room. When I saw that fractured world in my vision, I felt hopeless. But then I realized something. The future isn't set in stone. It's shaped by the actions we take today. And that means we have the power to build a better world, one filled with compassion, connection, and hope. The room erupted into applause as Marcus finished his speech. People stood to their feet, clapping and cheering, their faces filled with inspiration. Marcus felt a wave of relief and pride wash over him. He had done it. He had shared his message on one of the biggest stages of his life. After the event, attendees approached him in droves, eager to share how his words had impacted them. A young activist spoke about how the speech had reignited her passion for fighting climate change. A business leader expressed his intention to implement more compassionate practices in his company. Marcus listened to each story, his heart swelling with gratitude. But the most unexpected moment came when an elderly woman approached him, her eyes brimming with tears. "Marcus," she said, her voice trembling, "your story reminded me of something I've been trying to forget. When I was younger, I had the chance to help someone in need, but I didn't. I've carried that regret with me for decades. Hearing you today, it made me realize it's not too late. I can still make a difference." Marcus reached out and took her hand, his voice gentle. "It's never too late. Every moment is an opportunity to choose differently." The summit became a turning point in Marcus's journey. His message began to reach a global audience, sparking conversations and movements in places he had never imagined. His book sales skyrocketed, and invitations to speak poured in from around the world. But despite the newfound recognition, Marcus remained focused on the core of his mission, making a difference, one step at a time. He continued his work with the nonprofit, mentoring kids like Jordan and organizing community events. He launched a scholarship program for underprivileged students, helping them pursue their dreams and break the cycle of poverty. He collaborated with local leaders to address systemic issues, advocating for policies that promoted equity and compassion. One day, Marcus received a letter that left him speechless. It was from Jordan, the shy teenager he had mentored at the community center. Now in his 20s, Jordan was thriving as an artist, his work featured in galleries across the country. "Marcus," the letter read, "I don't know where I'd be today if it weren't for you. You saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself, and you gave me the courage to believe in my dreams. Thank you for everything. You changed my life." Tears filled Marcus's eyes as he read the words. It was a reminder of why he had chosen this path, why he had devoted himself to creating ripples of change. It wasn't about recognition or success, it was about the lives he had touched, the hope he had ignited, and the future he was helping to build. As the years passed, Marcus continued to grow and evolve. His story became a beacon of hope for people around the world, a testament to the power of choice and the resilience of the human spirit. He never forgot the visions that had set him on this path, carrying their lessons with him every step of the way. And while he knew he couldn't change the world alone, he also knew he didn't have to. The ripples he had started were spreading, carried forward by countless others who had been inspired to act. Together, they were building a future filled with light, one choice, one action, and one ripple at a time. Despite the growing reach of his message, Marcus often reflected on the quieter, more personal moments of his journey. He thought about the people whose lives he had touched, not through grand speeches or best-selling books, but through genuine human connection. It reminded him of the essence of his near-death experience, the power of small, deliberate actions to create lasting change. One day, while volunteering at the nonprofit, he noticed a new face. A young woman named Elena had just joined the team as a part-time volunteer. She was reserved, keeping to herself as she organized supplies in the storage room. Marcus approached her with his characteristic warmth. "Hi, I'm Marcus," he said, extending a hand. "I don't think we've met yet." Elena looked up, a hint of surprise in her eyes. "I'm Elena," she said, shaking his hand. "I just started here. I'm still figuring things out." "Well, welcome to the team," Marcus said with a smile. "If you need help with anything, don't hesitate to ask." Over the next few weeks, Marcus noticed that Elena always seemed to work in the background, avoiding the busier, more visible tasks. She was diligent and hardworking, but there was a heaviness to her demeanor that Marcus couldn't ignore. One afternoon, as they packed care packages together, he decided to strike up a conversation. "Elena, I couldn't help but notice you're always working so hard," Marcus began. "But you don't seem to interact much with the others. Is everything okay?" Elena hesitated, her hands pausing mid-motion. "I guess I just don't feel like I belong here," she admitted. "Everyone else seems so confident and sure of themselves. I'm not like that." Marcus's heart went out to her. "You know, I used to feel the same way," he said. "I thought I had to be perfect, to have everything figured out before I could make a difference. But I've learned that's not true. What matters most is showing up and being willing to help." Elena looked at him, her expression softening. "You really think I can make a difference?" "I know you can," Marcus said firmly. "Every single person here brings something unique to the table. And you're no exception." Encouraged by Marcus's words, Elena began to come out of her shell. She took on more visible roles, leading group activities and connecting with the people they served. Her confidence grew, and with it, her impact on the community. Marcus watched her transformation with pride, knowing that a simple conversation had unlocked her potential. But even as he celebrated Elena's growth, Marcus knew there were still bigger challenges to tackle. The fractured future he had seen in his vision wasn't just a metaphor, it was a reflection of systemic issues that needed to be addressed. He began to think about how he could leverage his platform to advocate for broader change. One night, as he scrolled through the news, a headline caught his attention: "Local community faces rising homelessness crisis." The article detailed the struggles of families who had been displaced due to economic hardships, painting a heartbreaking picture of a growing issue. Marcus felt a familiar pang of urgency. He couldn't ignore this. The next day, he reached out to the nonprofit's director to discuss the issue. "We need to do more," he said, his voice resolute. "The work we're doing here is important, but it's not enough. We have to address the root causes of these problems." The director nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I agree. But tackling something like homelessness requires resources, partnerships, and a lot of coordination. It's not an easy task." "I'm not looking for easy," Marcus replied. "I'm looking for impactful. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it happen." With the nonprofit support, Marcus began reaching out to local leaders, businesses, and organizations to form a coalition dedicated to addressing homelessness. He organized community forums to bring attention to the issue, inviting people from all walks of life to share their stories and ideas. The forums were emotional, filled with raw accounts of struggle and resilience. One story in particular stood out to Marcus. A single mother named Danielle spoke about losing her home after a series of medical bills drained her savings. She described the challenges of living in her car with her 2 young children, the constant fear and uncertainty they faced. "No one should have to go through this," Danielle said, her voice breaking. "We need help, not just temporary fixes, but real solutions." Her words resonated deeply with Marcus. He knew that addressing homelessness wasn't just about providing shelter, it was about creating pathways to stability and opportunity. Inspired by Danielle's story, he proposed a comprehensive initiative that combined emergency housing, job training, and access to affordable healthcare. The initiative, called Foundations of Hope, gained traction quickly. Marcus used his marketing expertise to raise awareness and secure funding, rallying the community around the cause. He worked tirelessly, balancing his speaking engagements with the demands of the initiative. It was exhausting, but the progress they made kept him motivated. As Foundations of Hope expanded, Marcus began to see tangible results. Families who had been on the brink of despair found stability and hope. Children who had struggled in school due to homelessness began to thrive. The ripple effects of their efforts were undeniable. But Marcus knew they couldn't stop there. The fractured future he had seen in his vision wasn't just about homelessness, it was about the interconnected challenges of inequality, division, and greed. He began to think about how they could address these issues on a larger scale. One evening, as he walked through the neighborhood, Marcus noticed a group of teenagers painting a mural on the side of a building. The artwork depicted scenes of unity and hope, a powerful contrast to the struggles many in the community faced. He stopped to admire their work, struck by the beauty and message of the mural. "Hey," he said, approaching the group. "This is incredible. Who's behind this?" A young woman with a paintbrush in hand turned to him, smiling. "We're part of a youth art collective," she explained. "We use art to raise awareness about social issues and inspire change." Marcus was impressed. "I'd love to learn more about what you're doing," he said. "I think there's a lot of potential to collaborate." The conversation led to a partnership between the Youth Collective and Foundations of Hope. Together, they organized events that combined art, education, and community engagement. The murals became symbols of resilience and unity, drawing attention to the issues the community faced and inspiring others to get involved. As Marcus stood before one of the completed murals, he felt a deep sense of pride. The work they were doing was more than just a response to the challenges of the present. It was a step toward creating a better future. He thought back to the presence he had encountered during his near-death experience, the voice that had told him every choice mattered. In that moment, Marcus realized something profound. The fractured world he had seen in his vision wasn't just a warning, it was a call to action. And while he couldn't change the world alone, he didn't have to. The ripples of change he had started were spreading, carried forward by countless others who shared his vision of a brighter, more compassionate future. As Foundations of Hope continued to grow, Marcus found himself surrounded by a vibrant network of people committed to making a difference. Artists, activists, business leaders, and volunteers all came together, united by a shared belief in the power of community. The once fragmented neighborhood began to transform, and Marcus could see the tangible impact of their efforts everywhere he turned. The murals painted by the Youth Collective became landmarks of hope, each one telling a story of resilience and unity. Marcus often visited these sites, watching as people stopped to admire the art and reflect on its message. One mural, in particular, stood out to him, a sprawling depiction of hands reaching out to one another, bridging gaps and lifting each other up. One afternoon, Marcus stood before this mural with Camille, who had joined him for a rare moment of reflection. "You've come a long way, Marcus," she said, her voice filled with pride. "Look at all of this. It's incredible." "It's not just me," Marcus replied, his eyes fixed on the mural. "None of this would have been possible without everyone who believed in this vision. It's a collective effort, and that's what makes it so powerful." Camille nodded, her gaze softening. "Still, you were the spark. You took that vision you had and turned it into something real. That's no small feat." As they walked through the neighborhood, Marcus and Camille stopped to speak with a woman named Teresa, who ran a small cafe that had become a hub for the community. Teresa had been one of the first business owners to support Foundations of Hope, hosting fundraisers and offering free meals to families in need. "Marcus?" Teresa greeted him warmly. "It's good to see you. How's everything going with the initiative? Better than I could have hoped, Marcus said, smiling. Thanks in no small part to people like you. Teresa waved off the compliment. I'm just doing my part. You're the one who's inspired all of us to step up. As they chatted, a young boy entered the cafe, clutching a sketchpad. Marcus recognized him immediately. It was Jordan, the aspiring artist he had mentored years ago. Now in his 20s, Jordan was thriving, his work gaining recognition both locally and nationally. Jordan, Marcus called out, waving him over. It's been too long. Jordan grinned as he approached, his confidence a stark contrast to the shy teenager Marcus had first met. Marcus, I heard you were back in the neighborhood. It's great to see you. The three of them sat down together, catching up on each other's lives. Jordan shared stories of his latest projects, including a collaborative mural he was working on with other local artists. It's about unity, he explained, his eyes lighting up with passion. I wanted to show how interconnected we all are, how every action we take affects someone else. Marcus felt a swell of pride as he listened. You've come so far, Jordan. I always knew you had it in you. Jordan shrugged modestly. I couldn't have done it without you, Marcus. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. That made all the difference. As they talked, Marcus couldn't help but reflect on the ripple effects of their actions. Jordan's success was a testament to the power of encouragement and support, and it reminded Marcus of the countless others who had been impacted by Foundations of Hope. Later that evening, Marcus returned home, his heart full but his mind restless. He couldn't stop thinking about the fractured future he had seen during his near-death experience. While the work they were doing was making a difference, he knew there was still so much more to be done. The vision had shown him a world divided by greed, fear, and apathy, a world he was determined to prevent. He sat down at his desk, pulling out his journal. Writing had become a way for him to process his thoughts and stay grounded amidst the chaos of his new life. As he flipped through the pages, he came across an entry he had written shortly after his near-death experience. The future isn't set in stone, it read. Every choice matters. Every action creates ripples. The words felt more relevant than ever. Marcus knew he couldn't rest on his laurels. The ripples they had started needed to grow into waves, reaching beyond their community to inspire change on a larger scale. The next morning, Marcus called a meeting with the team at Foundations of Hope. We've accomplished so much together, he began, his voice filled with gratitude. But I believe we can do even more. It's time to think bigger, to take what we've learned here and apply it on a broader scale. The team listened intently as Marcus outlined his vision for expanding their efforts. He proposed creating a network of similar initiatives in other communities, each one tailored to address the unique challenges they faced. The idea was ambitious, but Marcus believed it was achievable with the right partnerships and resources. The team was energized by his vision, and they wasted no time getting to work. They reached out to other nonprofits, community leaders, and businesses, sharing their model and inviting others to join the movement. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with people eager to replicate the success of Foundations of Hope in their own communities. As the network grew, Marcus found himself traveling frequently, visiting new cities and meeting with teams who were launching their own initiatives. Each visit reinforced his belief in the power of collective action. He saw firsthand how small steps could lead to transformative change, and he was inspired by the resilience and determination of the people he met. One visit in particular stood out to him. In a small town that had been devastated by economic decline, a group of high school students had started their own version of Foundations of Hope. They called it Seeds of Change, and their focus was on creating opportunities for young people to thrive. The students had organized mentorship programs, started a community garden, and even launched a podcast to raise awareness about local issues. Marcus was blown away by their initiative and creativity. "You're all incredible," he told them during a visit to their school. "What you're doing here is nothing short of amazing." A student named Maria, who led the group, smiled shyly. "We were inspired by you, Marcus. Your story showed us that we don't have to wait for someone else to make a difference. We can start right where we are." Hearing those words was a humbling experience for Marcus. It reminded him of the presence he had encountered during his near-death experience, the voice that had urged him to take responsibility for his actions and their impact on the world. He realized that the ripples he had started were now being carried forward by others, creating waves of change that he could never have achieved on his own. As he left the school, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. The work they were doing wasn't just about addressing immediate challenges, it was about planting seeds for a better future. And while the fractured world he had seen in his visions still loomed in his mind, he felt hopeful that they were moving in the right direction. Back in his own community, Marcus continued to lead by example. He spent time mentoring new volunteers, working on local projects, and sharing his story whenever he could. He never lost sight of the importance of small, deliberate actions, even as their efforts grew on a larger scale. One evening, as he walked through the neighborhood, he came across a young boy sitting on a bench, sketching in a notebook. The sight reminded him of Jordan, and he felt a pang of nostalgia. He approached the boy, curious about what he was drawing. "That's amazing," Marcus said, admiring the intricate details of the sketch. "What's your name?" "Eli," the boy replied, looking up with a shy smile. "Well, Eli, you've got a real talent," Marcus said. "Have you ever thought about showing your work to others?" Eli hesitated. "I don't think anyone would care." Marcus crouched down to meet his gaze. "I used to know someone who felt the same way. But he took a chance, and now his art is inspiring people all over the world. You never know what's possible until you try." Eli's face lit up with a mixture of hope and determination. Marcus handed him a flyer for a local art workshop, encouraging him to attend. As he walked away, Marcus couldn't help but smile. It was moments like these, small but meaningful, that reminded him of the power of connection. The ripples continued to grow, each one a testament to the choices they made and the impact they had on others. Marcus knew there was still much work to be done, but he also knew they were building something extraordinary, a future filled with compassion, unity, and hope.